Hi everyone, I'm Vasant Mohan, and welcome to Open Source Live, where we're talking to the leading voices in the open source community. I'm excited to have Viktoria Samand here with us from Databricks and formerly Amazon to talk about what they're doing with open source. So first question we have for you is, how do you see open source and open source AI evolving over the next several years?
That's a great question. I think the way about it is that it really transforms the industry and making all the platforms accessible. So I kind of compare open source AI to Linux. If you think about Linux, they didn't just compete with Windows. They eventually powered most of the servers in the
Yeah.
world and created the things, running all of these different microservices and all the infrastructure and the software that we're utilizing now that we don't even know about it, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of think about open source AI is also building this foundation and really democratizing the future of AI powered software.
Yeah, which is a great segue into, while I think open source is definitely that infrastructure layer that developers are building on top
Yeah.
of, there's also a lot of things that are happening below that where infrastructure requirements are changing.
Yes.
How do you see that evolving in as AI more broadly continues to evolve?
Yeah, I think there are two ways, right? The way that we think about open source evolving. There are two things that need to happen. First of all, we are improving technology, right? So as you said, it's just software. We're improving our models to be more efficient. For example, with model pruning, right? We are like reducing some branches, and
Yeah,
this will help us to create smaller models that will need less of a hardware, right?
sure.
So that's one thing. Like another example with model distillation. Also, we are taking big models like teachers, right?
Yep.
And smaller model students and transferring the knowledge, only the one we need, to the students.
Yep.
Well, this also happens because now you don't need this massive GPUs, right? Thousands of GPUs to run the models. You can utilize a smaller model. So I see a lot of improvements and efficiency gained on the software side, but at the same time, there is also in the hardware side, right, or the accelerators, like
Yep.
what Samba Nova is doing, right? Not utilizing GPUs, but having just RGUs that are optimized for data flow. So I think this combination of both software and hardware accelerator is really what will help us to democratize this technology.
Yeah.
And you can already see it in the numbers. So I was looking at the statistics with Hugging Face.
Mhm.
So right now they have 1.8 million models already hosted like
Yeah.
open source, which is crazy, right? But if you look just 1 year ago, it was 1.3. So just in 1 year, they basically grew 40% in
Yeah.
1 year. So I just imagine like what will happen in the next 2 years. I think the landscape will be completely different on the software side.
Yeah.
And also we will see a lot more advancements with hardware. I think DeepSeek was actually quite an interesting example that showed
Yeah.
us, right, how they were able not to cut the cost, right? So with similar proprietary models, it was about 100 million that they spent.
Yeah.
But with DeepSeek, they utilized older GPUs and they were able to train it so much more efficiently. It was under 6 million. So that's really significant achievements in a way that we are even thinking about how to utilize hardware for training.
Well done. A lot of great points there. I think it's really interesting that you bring up kind of the models are growing at 40%. And funnily enough, I think we're seeing similar trends in how inference demand is growing
Yeah.
so rapidly as well. Uh, can you also talk a little bit? I mean, you mentioned fine tuning and kind of making these models even more smaller and almost creating experts that for different domains. How do you see that shaping out, especially as it relates to open source?
Yeah, so I think with open source, one of the things that I'm particularly excited that open source now making it viable for the use case that were not viable before from a cost perspective.
Yeah.
Now, because your cost is reducing. So I read somewhere that in the past 2 years, the inference cost dropped by 280 times. So it becomes 280 times cheaper now
Yeah.
to run this inference. And then, of course, it's great for big corporations, but at the same time, it's really good for social impact
Yep.
because now you can utilize this open source model for the use cases that before were just cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
So that's one area where I see there is a big of advancement.
I think that the other thing that's interesting is just in terms of accuracy improvements as enterprises start to bring in more of their proprietary data. Uh, you start to see, I think, more of these enterprise customers get cheaper results from fine tuning, higher accuracy that beats out the closed proprietary models, and overall allows them to control their own destiny, whether they're bringing it on-prem or in a hybrid motion as well.
Yeah, so you said that right. So from one side, we have, yes, the cost is decreasing, but from the other side, the quality is improving, right?
Yeah.
So with Llama models, they were able to get almost like, it's over 80%, right, of
Yeah.
the scores based on the general statistics. And what you see that these models become so good that they compete with proprietary models. And honestly, for my use cases, I was evaluating the other day Llama 4 versus Claude. And I was like, well, if it's 15 times cheaper for me to utilize Llama, why do I need to use Claude? So cost is decreasing, quality is improving. And on another side, we also see a lot of the governance that becoming a lot better. So Databricks just announced the MLflow 3, which is open source, right? It's an open source platform for evaluation and tracing of GenAI. So now people can not only like you have those models, but how do you actually implement them in your workload? It's a good model when you ask general questions, right? But then when you connect it to your data, how do you know that it performs well? Well, that's where you now have those evaluations, right? You can create custom metrics, you can utilize LLM judges, and you will see improvement. And that's what I'm really excited, because now you can just swap with one API, right? Go from proprietary model to open source, and you can see if you don't see any changes or perhaps even improvements.
Exactly.
Why to use proprietary?
No, I mean, I think the other key thing here is when you're looking at these agents and these flows, you're chaining a bunch of different requests together, and then speed starts to become a big deal.
Yes.
Especially because you don't want to be waiting minutes, hours for responses, especially in those interactive use cases. How are you seeing speed become more and more important for your customers?
That's a great question about the speed. So one thing, as you mentioned, if we have a model that takes, let's say, you have a customer agent, right? And it takes about 10 seconds to provide you an answer where you're going to hang up, right? And you're not going to do anything. So the ways that I see with the speed, we kind of like also have to decouple almost storage from compute. Because if you think about the multimodal, you now have so much in terms of image, video, right? And text. So you need to have thousands of GPU being trained. So speed become critical in terms of just training, but also speed become critical for inference. So I think it's this combination. And I read recently about all of the providers, how they're now become really looking into nuclear power, right? Because in order for you to achieve those great results, right, you have to have power. You have to have power, and we see this with a Stargate project, right? 500 million, like half a trillion, right? Being invested in building this state-of-the-art data centers that will help us to get the speed and really provide us with enterprise AI.
Yeah. I think the very interesting thing, I'm glad you brought up power, is that there's so many different architectures there, and efficiency of how you utilize the power, especially because there's a reason we have to invest in building up these data centers, is because a lot of this new architecture is requiring more and more investments. But there's a flip side to that, which is, can you use what you already have way more efficiently? That's what Samanova is really trying to do with our existing architectures and having something that's purpose built. How do you see kind of this landscape of AI and infrastructure really kind of growing over the next few years, as we are already, despite kind of this grow out and build out of nuclear, the demand is growing constantly today, and we still have to use whatever capacity we have now to try and meet that demand, and efficiency starts to become even more important.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons why only 14% of the companies are successful to go from POC to production. They don't realize how much infrastructure power it actually requires for enterprise AI. So the way that we are solving this on Databricks side is we are multi-cloud, right? So you can work with GCP, you can work with AWS and Azure. So now you can spin this GPU clusters and orchestrate them based on your demand, and you have flexibility in choosing what to do. I know that on Sambanova side, you're also just helping customers to get more with less, right? The RGUs provide 10 times more speed compared to GPU. That's also quite exciting field. So I think about just trying to, yes, we have these long-term investments, but they're not going to materialize that fast, right? So we have to find a ways that we can accelerate. And I can see already good examples where it's been implemented in enterprise AI. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at San Francisco, and the Waymo cars that are completely driverless. And it was so exciting to see like some of them, and you're like, wow, it's kind of like almost feels like a science fiction, right? Like the car is just driving by itself, spinning the wheel. And like if you think about all the technology behind it, right? You have to process so much real-time information. So we see that those enterprise AI are already real. And I think it's more investments we are doing, and it's better we are improving software and the hardware, the more we will see such exciting things.
It's really exciting how fast this is all changing. Awesome. So to wrap things up, I thought we would end with a kind of a short question here, which is just to complete this sentence, which is, in the next 5 years, AI will blank. Fill in the blank.
In the next 5 years, AI will enable not only enterprises, but also enable people and small companies to utilize its power on any device in any language. And we will see more use cases where we have AI tutors or AI doctors that are now completely democratizing education, healthcare, and legal sphere. So I'm really quite excited about the social impact.
And then one last thing to wrap up on is like, it's more of a hot take question. What is one thing you think proprietary models are fearing about how the open source ecosystem is evolving and growing?
I think it's commoditization. Because if you think about like recently with DeepSeek, right? When they announced their model, the market reacted like was crazy, right? Because now you're basically saying, oh, all of these big tech companies, maybe their evaluation is not that, reasonable. Because if you're now saying somebody was able to train similar model 20 times cheaper, utilizing a lot less hardware. So I think that's one thing. And I even saw one of the statements from Sam Altman, where he said, I think we were on the wrong side. And I think more and more companies realize it. And I see it also with Anthropic, how they're building not just an LLM, right? Which is great, responsible, but how they really building deep integrations, whether it's with Slack, whether it's with Cloud Code. Because if you are just an LLM provider, it's very easy to replace you, right? It's just an API call, and you put a different model, and now you're utilizing a new model. But if you build these deep integrations, whether with VS Code or tools, then you become a more client sticky, and it will be much harder to replace you. So I think we will see more tooling, more integrations, perhaps even also more custom models, where now these proprietary models become so good in a particular domain that no open source models can compete with them.
I think that's a great point. Like, for example, OpenAI just released their deep research API, right? And so it's integrating tools, it's integrating web search, trying to make that a lot more streamlined for developers. Open source models aren't going to necessarily go into that space, but people might build on top of that to compete there. So exactly right. Two very different domains where these proprietary companies are trying to compete, and they have to go up the stack to make it so that they can differentiate more. And I think commoditization is exactly what we're excited about with open source, and making it a lot more accessible for developers around the world to enjoy and explore with AI.
Exactly. We want developers to enjoy and explore with AI.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Viktoria, for your time. This has been great, and appreciate you sharing your knowledge with everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.